Hey, good morning. We're going to take it way back today, all the way back to the year 8, and read a little, it's long for this series, but it is a short excerpt from Ovid's great masterwork, The Metamorphoses, published in the year 8. Ovid was born in 43 in Rome, 43 BCE, I should say, and then died in 17 or 18 CE. And he's best known for his great one of these great books of the Western world, the Metamorphoses, which retells a bunch of Greek myths and is an important source for Greek mythology, and as well as incorporates original myths, possibly things that Ovid came up with or else sourced from elsewhere. But I spent some time reading it last year, and it was really kind of carried away and swept away by it. It's so vivid, especially in this 1993 verse translation by Alan Mandelbaum, which is just really vivid and engaging. But yeah, I was really taken with it. And it is, when I bought this copy at John K. King North, the book clerk said, the greatest story ever told. And it seems like that, that must be true. I mean, it's this astonishing series of interwoven narratives. One thing's always leading to the next for all, 600 pages here. But everything's kind of unified by this idea of transformation, metamorphosis, change. Everyone's always turning into something else over the course of the action. And when I say action, these cats are so interested today, sorry. I really mean it. Like, sometimes when you read the Metamorphoses, it feels like an action movie. It's profoundly violent, like astonishingly, horrifyingly violent. There's like blood spurting everywhere and people are turning into wolves and ripping each other to shreds. But this story that I've chosen to read, Baucis and Philomen, is one of the sort of gentler tales in the Metamorphoses. And I think I was drawn to it because I can't help but have come from this Christian faith tradition. I was raised Catholic. And this, I guess, like, when I read the Metamorphoses, sometimes I'm kind of astonished by it for a lot of reasons. One being they're like fables without morals, which is hard to, like, when you come from this Christian tradition, it's hard to understand how that works. But this one is different. It reminds me of other traditions because it's about a kind, loving, simple couple. It's a nice love story who are rewarded for their act of kindness and hospitality to strangers who are in fact gods, which is the kind of story you hear in different traditions. Okay, this is a long one. I'm just going to get started. Among the Phrygian hills there stands an oak together with a linden. Round them both a low wall runs. And I have seen this spot, for Pythias sent me there. His father Pelops, before he came to treason, ruled in Phrygia. Close to that spot there is a stagnant marsh, a place that once had welcomed crops and men. It now has water birds, loons, and marsh hens. And Jupiter came there, in mortal guise, and with his father, though he'd set aside his wings, came Mercury, Atlas' grandson, with the caduceus, his wondrous wand. They asked for shelter at 1,000 doors, and at 1,000 they were shunned and spurned. But one house took them in, a modest place. Its roof was thatched with simple straw and reeds. And in that hut there lived an aged woman, the pious Baucis, and with her Philomen, as old as she was. They were wed when young, within that hut, and there they had grown old, serene in poverty, not seeing it as taint or tarnish, something to be hid. You need not ask who was the master, who the servant in that house, for only 2 lived there. The pair commanded and they served. And when the 2 gods from the sky arrived, they stooped on entering. The door was low. The old man, setting out a bench on which his Baucis had been quick to spread rough cloth, invited them to sit, to rest their limbs. The coals of yesterday were covered by warm ashes. Baucis, raking these aside, now fanned the coals and added leaves, dry bark. Then, on her hands and knees, with all the breath she had, she breathed new life into the hearth. That done, from underneath the roof, she took wood splits and dried out twigs and broke them up into still smaller pieces, small enough to set beneath a little copper pot. She took the greens Philomen had brought in from their well-watered garden, and she cleaned a cabbage, lopping off the outer leaves. Meanwhile, her husband used a two-tined pole to spear a chine of smoked ham hanging from a rafter's blackened beams, and slicing off a modest portion of that well-kept pork, he put it in the boiling pot to cook. And they beguiled their waiting time with talk and readying the table. Baucis shook a cushion made of marsh grass, placing it upon the dining couch, with feet and frame of willow wood. And over this they draped the cover the old couple kept for feast days, but even this was worn and plain, a cloth quite in accord with such a willow couch. The gods recline. Old Baucis, with her skirts tucked up and hands that shook a bit, sets out the table. One of its 3 legs was short, but then the piece of broken pottery she jams beneath the shorter leg adjusts the slant. At last it's level. And with green mint leaves, old Baucis wipes the table clean. She offers dappled olives, green and black, the berries frank Minerva cherishes, wild cherries, pickled fruits of autumn, kept in lees of wine, endive and radishes, and curdled cheese, and, taken from warm ashes, some very delicately roasted eggs. And all of this is served on earthen dishes. That same rich ware is matched by the embossed wine bowl they have set out with beechwood cups, whose cracks and holes were patched with yellow wax. And soon the steaming ham and cabbage come from off the hearth, and wine of no great age again is served, then set aside. The space is needed for the final course: dried dates and nuts and figs and plums and purple grapes straight from the vine, and fragrant apples heaped in ample baskets. And the centerpiece, a comb of honey that is pale and clear. And to all these are added liveliness, good cheer, kind faces, willing, generous. Meanwhile, the aged couple noticed this. The wine bowl, which had served so many cups, seemed to replenish its own self, fill up again with welling wine. Dismayed, this sight was unbelievable. Afraid, both Baucis and the old Philomen prayed with hands, palms up to heaven, begging pardon for food so meager and so scant a welcome. Then they got set to kill their only goose, the guardian of their poor patch of land. They planned to serve it to their godly guests. But that was no slow goose. He tired out the aged couple as he flapped about. He slipped the chase until at last, it seems, he landed safely near the deities. And then the gods told Baucis and Philomen that they were not to kill the goose. They said, "We're gods indeed. Your sacrilegious neighbors have earned the punishment they will receive, but you'll be saved from that catastrophe. And now, come, leave your hut and go with us to the tall peak that you can see far off." They both obeyed, and taking up their staffs, they made their slow way up the mountain path. When they were just a bow shot from the top, they turned around and saw, below, a swamp that covered everything but their own hut. And while the aged couple watched, amazed, and weeping for their neighbor's fate, that hut in which they'd lived so long, a home that was small even in their eyes, became a temple. In place of those forked poles that had sustained the roof, now marble columns stood. The straw now gleamed with gold. Carved panels graced the doors, and on the ground there stretched a marble floor. Then Jove, the son of Saturn, said with calm, "You, just old man, and you, his worthy wife, tell me what you desire most." Philomen spoke briefly to his Baucis, then declared unto the gods their choice, the wish they shared. "We want to be your priests, to guard your shrine. And since, for such long years, we two have lived in harmony, we pray that the same hour in which one dies may also take the other, that I may never see her sepulchre, and she may never have to bury me." Their wish was honored, and as long as life was granted them, they served within the shrine. But weary with their long, long years, one day as they were standing near those sacred steps, recounting times gone by in that dear place, old Baucis saw that boughs were covering Philomen, even as the old Philomen saw his dear Baucis covered by green boughs. One treetop covered both their faces now, but they, as long as they still could, called out in unison, "Farewell, dear mate, farewell," until at the same instant bark had sealed their lips. And Phrygian farmers still will show two trunks that stand beside each other, two that once were Baucis and Philomen's bodies.